You know, if you were in the BDSM studios right now, you would see, or if I had video on, you would see behind me Batman Forever playing. Sorry, I can't do a Tommy Lee Jones Two-Face laugh. I love that fucking movie. I know, I really do. Like I get it that it's not, you know, it's not the classic Tim Burton Batman and all that. I understand, you know, how cheesy it is. I understand that, you know, the amount of neon, the nipples, the whole thing. Like, I get it. Okay. But that was really an attempt at doing the 66 Batman and putting it on the really big screen with the big effects budget and so on. That's really how I feel about that film. And I still think it's brilliant. I think it's sexy. I think Val Kilmer did a hell of a job as both Bruce Wayne and Batman. I really do. I think that movie is sorely misunderstood. And unfortunately it came out during a time where, you know, kind of the Frank Miller-esque Batman was at its height. You could argue Batman never left that, but I don't know. With Batman getting married these days, give me a break. We're in some uncharted territory as far as who and what Batman is these days. But anyway, I'm not here to talk about that. It is your Sovereign Tech Patreon-only Wednesday Q&A. And we have got a lot to get into. And there's a tech question, and I think we might get into another little edition of the Golden Stallion's favorite conspiracy theories. But speaking of a little conspiracy, so did anyone else around 2:18 Eastern, did anyone else get their presidential alert on their smartphone? Oh, fucking A. Anyway, it's just stupid. I know there were some people who were saying, oh, don't look at the presidential alert. It's going to have some kind of mind control thing to it or something. Anyway, I mean, I knew what it was. I knew it was coming. They had mentioned it. Steve Gibson had mentioned it over like the past 3 weeks on Security Now, which I think it is important to let people know that this thing's going to be coming because, you know, as soon as you see the phrase presidential alert come across your phone screen, like most people hadn't seen that before, even though I've seen weather alerts and things like that in the past, most of those you can turn off. You can't turn off the presidential alert. But yeah, I mean, they hopefully they warned people, but just stupid. Anyway, it's all just nonsense, and you really should be able to turn that shit off. I don't know if you can even do that. I should look if that's possible to do in Lineage OS. Yeah, in Lineage OS, I think you can turn them all off. So, you know, kudos to Lineage OS for that, right? But anyway, this was, you know, pretty standard fare. It's really nothing any different than, you know, the emergency broadcasting system that used to, you know, play on TV, on network television every once in a while, you know, or just do the right, that whole bullshit that would interfere with The Price is Right. Or honestly, when I was watching the 66 Batman as a kid, that would happen all the time. Just fucking annoying. But whatever, I get it. You know, you never know when there's going to be some kind of missile alert because it's not like those are ever wrong. Hawaii. Woo, how about that? Anyway, so of course, that's not the only thing to have been going down today for a lot of people. Actually, I think it started yesterday. Because I did the update last night. But Microsoft had their big event for October, a bit of a big hardware event. They have new headphones, all this other stuff. We'll probably talk some of that just because there are some interesting things as to where usually with an Apple event, there's nothing interesting at all going on. Microsoft events, usually there's a little something interesting, right? And, you know, I got to admit, I mean, fuck Microsoft, but goddamn, I love Panos Panay. I think that guy, I think he's smooth silk. I mean, he is just, man, no price too high. There's no way they could possibly be paying that guy enough. I mean, he is just a sweet talker, so smooth. In fact, I think The Verge did an interview with him afterwards. And he talked about, you know, everybody was like hoping for, of course, most people knew it wasn't going to get revealed at this, but most people were hoping for Andromeda, right? For Project Andromeda to get released. Now, theoretically, what Project Andromeda is and what this Andromeda device is, and that's it, it's a device, is, or supposedly anyway, of course, these things are subject to change, It's a foldable Surface device, okay, where it's like, it looks like a Nintendo DS or 3DS, but it's a Surface computer. That's supposedly what this thing's all about. And in the interview that Panos did after the event, he pretty much said that's his baby. And so whether or not that's ever actually going to be a thing, well, that's a whole other story. But there's some quiet admission that, yeah, we'd like this sort of thing to exist. But I mean, the point that he brought up about that I thought was salient, is that how do we convince people to have this pocketable computer but also have a smartphone at the same time? Because it's probably not going to be a smartphone that's going to be running. Unless, somehow Microsoft does some kind of not that this hasn't been tried before, or that it's still not tried by other companies and so on, some kind of emulation layer for Android where it can actually be a phone and so on. This is getting into like, I think we're talking like 5 and 10 year plans, or like Microsoft's infamous 9-year room, right? Where when they go into this room, they pretend that it's 9 years in the future. I think this is more of something that's for like the 9-year room. But it was interesting to get at least some admission that yes, this is a thing and this is something that Panos wants. And honestly, I think whatever Panos wants, he gets, because that guy. That guy could sell you anything. I mean, he is just magic to watch. He really is. So anyway, with that announcement of all the different hardware that they released, which a lot of it was just a refresh, except for the Surface headphones. Yes, Surface headphones. Again, I'll talk about it on Sovereign Tech Prime episode. Windows 10 1809 came out, the latest version of Windows 10, the October 2018 update, as it were, or what'll be, amongst the tech savvy, the 1809 update. So that came out, and there's a few interesting, like the clipboard can do a little bit more now. They added in some emoji and whatever. We might briefly mention this on the Sovereign Tech Prime episode as well. But I'll admit that, okay, so I did the update last night, and I actually didn't have to call for it. It was ready for me to go, which was interesting because the laptop the computer that I updated is a Dell that's like a good 2-3 years old. I mean, it's an older model. So for it to be all set for that on that day, they were probably planning pretty hard for that. I think Microsoft feels like they really have to, their update situation, they have to improve that. Like they've got to wow some people with what that update situation looks like. But that's hard because you have so much different hardware that runs Windows 10. Anyway, the update was ready for me. I installed it last night, and I haven't really run into any bugs. And I had been using, actually, this very computer, I've been using it all day. And because I'm recording this at night, and of course, this recording is it the 2nd of October? Oh, it's the 3rd, October 3rd, 2018. So anyway, I've been running it. But last night, as soon as I restarted and did the update, and it took a few minutes, probably took a good 10 minutes for the update to go, not to download, but to actually, update Windows 10. As soon as that was done, like the first thing that I noticed, and it's amazing how much it struck me. And I don't want this to be the big news, but it's kind of the biggest feature, I think, to come out of Windows 10. And we all know what we're talking about because it's the same big feature to happen with the new Android. It's the same big feature to happen with the new Mac OS. It's the same new feature. You pick your operating system. Dark mode hits you like a ton of bricks. I mean, when you see the File Explorer, holy fuck, is suddenly, with a dark background, I can't tell you the sense of euphoria that I felt. Now, not because, and this isn't something, like I get it, because I picked on the Mac OS people, the MacBook people, okay, the Apple people. I picked on them for getting all hot and bothered about dark mode and everything, right? Here's the thing, is that I have wanted that, and I have I have downloaded and used alternative file explorers like XE Commander, or where it used to be Free Commander and so on, just so I could have a fucking dark mode. Or I would put the color scheme on previous versions of Windows to high contrast. That way things could be black. Okay, but there are always little quirks with that, always little problems where something just wouldn't look right, or a game wouldn't exactly, rock out right, and it would fuck with things. And so you couldn't really run it all the time, and it was always a pain in the ass. And so this has been a dream for Windows, at least for me, maybe not for anyone else, but this has been a dream since I was not even a teenager. And to suddenly see that, I mean, just like my jaw dropped. Like, wait, what happened? And I had totally forgotten, just because I couldn't give a rat's ass really about Microsoft, but I had totally forgotten that was going to be like a, part of the new feature set for Windows 10 1809. And there it was. And I was just like, wow, it really struck you. But then at the same time, no dark mode for, Office 2019 or whatever they're schlepping that out as. And so then it doesn't necessarily matter, because when I'm really typing shit out, well, nothing's changed, and go figure, right? Speaking of typing out. So anyway, dark mode's a thing, and it is pretty brilliant to see in Windows. And it's a contrast, no pun intended. It's a contrast to what I'm really used to in other operating systems. I mean, Ubuntu is really great, and a lot of Linux distros are really great about having a dark mode, even though they run into problems as well. But I have been recently experimenting with a Chromebook, and that a Sovereign Tech listener got for me. And, everything's like bright as day on that goddamn thing. And holy hell, is that annoying. Not to say that it's a wholly bad experience. And I will be doing a review episode for patrons only about the Chromebook, because I think there's some interesting things to talk about with that. But man, yeah, that dark mode hits you. I mean, it is a standout. Because we've been dealing with the stock Windows Explorer for a long, long time, and for it to finally not sear your eyes into excruciating pain, not bad. But anyway, speaking of writing comfortably, the company Astra House, which came out with the free write, which is like this, pretty much it's the Kindle Paperwhite of typewriters. Like, it has an e-ink screen. It can upload to Google Docs, whatever else, or Dropbox. We talked about this a few weeks ago on Sovereign Tech Prime, that they were going to release what was called the Traveler. The company that makes the free write was going to release what's called the Traveler, which is pretty much a laptop. I mean, it's not running Windows or anything, or I mean, maybe it's some version of Linux, but it's not. It's running really a custom operating system. No, I don't know if there's going to be any apps on it. It doesn't come out till June 2019, but they started their Indiegogo campaign for it. And this came out, and I was excited for it, because it's effectively a laptop with an e-ink screen that can, that's main concentration is writing. Excites the hell out of me. And I did jump on it for Indiegogo, and so I plan on being one of the first ones to have one. And so come June 2019, when this thing actually gets released and shipped, certainly I'll be talking about it, and I'll be using the fuck out of it, because, I've been writing up a storm as late. Not going to get into what those projects are, but I've been writing like crazy, and fuck would I love to have an e-ink screen in front of me instead of that searing white Office or whatever. I know there's plenty of apps and software that I could use that, will give me a dark background and that easily converts to a regular, white background and so on. I'm aware. I'm absolutely aware of that. I mean, I'm the golden stallion, for fuck's sake. Okay. But regardless, like, I want that kind of solution that would like really make my eyes not be painful at all, because anytime you're looking at these screens, I mean, it's just, it's causing trouble. So, all right. Anyway, that's out there. You can back it early. I don't know if they're still doing their early bird special, but I got the damn thing for a song. I mean, because originally they're going to sell for $600. I am paying nowhere near that, like less than half that by a long shot. So I was really excited about that. But anyway, we're here to do your questions. This is just stuff that's been going on. Another thing, one last bit, and then we will get into your questions. Again, we only have a couple this week. Then we got a great album of the week. The Relationship Rhombus show, we recorded it, me, Stephanie, and Leslie, we recorded it on Sunday night. There was a technical issue. It ended up having to get released in October. Now, if somebody left Patreon because, oh shit, you got your Relationship Rhombus show a day later, I mean, come on. Like, do you people know? Look at other patrons. or creators. Look at other Patreon creators, not patrons. Look at other Patreon creators. You find me the creator that puts out the amount of content I do. You got to understand, when you put, and I know because I have the feed as well. When I put or you put just the podcast feed, that's not even the rest of the stuff that I put out there on Patreon. When you put the podcast feed into Pocket Casts, okay, it gives you a rating of like how frequently does a podcast come out or whatever. Do you realize the Patreon feed for Sovereign Tech registers as a daily fucking podcast feed? Daily. I'm not knocking other Patreon creators. I'm not knocking them. I am just saying, if you don't think you're getting your money's worth, or if you can't hold off that one, oh shit, the Relationship Rhombus show came out 14 hours after it was supposed to originally release in the month of September, so it came out October 1st instead. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I love you people, but come on. And I don't make half. I look at it, it's so funny. In fact, I was looking. So I'm a patron for some Patreon creators. One of my favorite is Norman Crusoe, the gaming historian. I love the guy. I have nothing bad to say about the guy. I don't have any problem with how he does business. I don't have any problem with what he puts out for content on Patreon. I have no problem with any of that. But all he does, and I don't mean this isn't a pejorative, I mean it in comparison. All he does is he puts out this little Wednesday thing, this Wednesday update. And maybe you get one of his videos a few days early. He makes way more than I do on Patreon. I mean, leaps and bounds beyond. And I know that he puts a shit ton of work into his videos, so I'm not knocking him for anything. Okay, he's deserving of that money. It's why I give him some. All right, but the point being is that most creators don't put a tenth out there of what I do. And I just can't believe somebody would complain about that, and drop their patronage. I mean, it's one thing if you didn't like the content. Sure, I can understand that. That was I can imagine that was maybe some people were very offended. Oh, no. You're listening to me. I don't know why you don't expect to get offended at some point because, boy, let me rub my hands together and get warmed up. But it's just unbelievable, I mean, I put out so much shit on this fucking feed alone. Again, that's to say nothing of the rest of the stuff that I'm putting out on Patreon, especially now with the tier system, October. This is going to ramp up like there's no tomorrow. You just wait and see. Anyway, let's get into our question, shall we? So our first question, it's actually a question that it's one of those ones where a lot of people have asked it, and it's one of those ones where, I talk about these sometimes, that there's some subjects that have to, especially with a tech show, that you need to readdress once or twice a year, and say, okay, what's the best one to use now? Like VPNs. Okay, what's the best VPN to use now? Okay, what's the best computer to buy now? Should I get this? Should I get that? Et cetera, et cetera. And it's one of the most common things really to get asked into any tech show, not just mine. Granted, unlike other tech shows, for example, so there's no need for me to really read the question. People are asking, the basic question is, what's the best phone to get right now? Okay. And it's probably been, I think it's been since maybe February since I had last talked about this. So yeah, it's worth a refresh, to talk about it again. Again, this is one I don't mind. Once or twice a year, you bring the subject up and let's talk about what's the best thing going out there. Okay. And I think last time I did it was on a Prime episode anyway, so it's good to get it in for a Patreon only episode. Now, granted, if somebody was asking me, hey, what's the best phone to get out there? Or to get that's out there, and I'm a drug dealer or something. I want to engage in activities where I want the least possible chance of spying eyes or prying eyes upon me. Unlike other tech shows, I'll try and give you an answer about that. Okay. Even though you might not like the answer. And the real answer is don't use a fucking phone. But regardless of that. But this is very basic and just, a few people over really the past couple months have been saying, yeah, I mean, and I feel bad because I should respond right away because sometimes these people are looking for a phone right away and so on. But over the past couple months, there's been a lot of this specific question. So I figure we'll get back into it and talk about it. And I think there might be a little bit of a worthwhile update here and there. Probably these questions were inspired by the fact that I said that the Android Go phones, particularly the Nokia 2, was a piece of shit. And that like the software just was not ready for prime time. All kinds of problems to come along with the Android Go experience. So to answer the question, what's the best phone to get right now? Ironically, I just got done saying that the Nokia 2 is a piece of shit. Here's the funny thing about it. Ever since Nokia funny thing about Nokia. So Nokia was owned by Microsoft, sort of. And then it kind of got sold off, shut down, blah, blah, blah. And then there was still another Nokia that kind of existed outside of its hardware business, or outside of its phone business anyway. But then that Nokia, along with a couple other companies, decided to actually make a company called HMD Global. This is the name of the company. And this is the quote-unquote parent company of the Nokia brand. But this company, HMD Global, was literally created just to rock out these, new Nokia phones, which are all Android based now. Well, not all of them. Some of them run KaiOS, right? There's they re-released the 8110, right, which is the Matrix phone. They got the banana phone. They call it the Matrix phone, or they call it the banana phone. That's out there, but that runs KaiOS. But in general, these are Android phones that we're talking about that go out there. And you have the Nokia 3.1, you have the Nokia 5.1, the Nokia 7, the Nokia 6.1, the Nokia 6.1 Plus, the Nokia 8. I mean, they have this what is a seemingly simple number scheme, but it ends up being complex after the first time that they release their damn phones and they do a sequel, to them. So the Nokia, like I just said, how the Nokia 2 is a piece of shit. A lot of the Nokia doesn't really have a flagship phone. They're all mid-range phones. Like, they don't really make a competitor, say, to the Galaxy S9 or whatever. But they're mid-range. They're higher-end phones, which still cost generally less than $300. Generally, not always. Are phenomenal. I mean, like they're great goddamn phones. And to answer the question, I mean, you can get one of these for sub $200. But to buy new, you're going to pay about $250 or so. The Nokia 6.1, the 2018 edition, okay, is probably the best phone on the market today. And in fact, I'd stand it up to just about any other phone out there right now, even the flagships. Okay, it might not be as buttery smooth as like the flagship phones are, your Galaxies and so on. But this is a damn fine phone. I mean, really, really solid. And I mean, and it's for a Black Mirror or a Black Slab or an Infinity Box or, by the way, did you know that's what Black Mirror means? It's talking about your smartphone. Or the Fondle Slab, whatever. Like, it's a handsome looking device for what it is. It really is. Like, it has that nice copper and black to it. Now, I'm not going to say that I'm not recommending it as a full-on dark Android device, put Lineage OS on it, blah, 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 blah. No, that wasn't like the point of most of these questions, is that they just wanted a good smartphone. Okay. So I think the Nokia 6.1 for just a stock Android smartphone, best thing running out there. And now, like I said, Android Go, and I did a full review of Android Go, is horrible. It is a horrible thing, a horrible idea. The hardware is just still not enough for the software. It's supposedly customized to run on really low-end hardware. No, it's just not true. Android Go is shit. Android One, on the other hand, that is a completely separate thing. Android One is great. Android One is pretty much a Pixel experience. It's a pure Google Android experience. And the Nokia 6.1 2018 edition is an Android One phone. Now, the nice thing about that is that Android One phones get support for 2 years. Now, what does support mean? It means it gets security updates, and it means it gets the latest operating system versions for the next 2 years. So while if you buy the Nokia 6.1 or 6.1, whatever, today, it's going to come with Oreo. It's going to come with, Android 8.1. But you're guaranteed to get Android 9, and you're probably guaranteed to get Android 10, whatever that ends up being. You might even get Android 11. You might. I don't know, but you might. But it's not like you're paying out a shit ton of money anyway for this phone. I think this is the way to go, especially when you consider that there have been exploits found that affect every phone that isn't running Android 9. Okay, like really horrible exploits. So that's an important thing to really consider, okay? Now, if you are looking to get a phone that uses Lineage OS that's really solid, my answer has not changed since I think the last time we talked about this. You get the Echo Pro 3, okay? Echo Pro 3, and it's a little bit of a pain in the ass to get Lineage OS on there, okay? Because I don't think unlocking the bootloader was the problem. Or no, yes, unlocking the bootloader was a little bit of an issue. But you can do it, okay? There's little simple tricks and nonsense to it. But the Echo Pro 3, still probably the most popular Lineage OS phone out there. The Essential phone by the company Essential, what is that, the PH1 or whatever, is probably at some point going to take over as far as being the number one Lineage OS phone. But right now, I think the Echo Pro 3 is still the number one Lineage OS phone. So I still recommend that, and you can get that for like $150 now. You can get that for a song. But it's not only worthwhile if you get it for Lineage OS, because you're going to install Lineage OS on it. If you're just going to run the Android, that you're never going to get Android updates. You're not going to get security updates. Probably not. It's a terrible idea. Don't do it. Get the Nokia 6.1 if you're going to do that. Okay. As far as flagship phones or around flagship phone, I think actually the BlackBerry Key 2 is probably the best thing going. And especially if we're not talking about like anti-NSA security. If we're talking about, because I don't think that as far as like with stock Android, with Google still involved, not AOSP or Lineage OS or anything like that, or Copperhead OS or something. I think with stock Android, or a device that runs Google's Android, you have no hope of being like anti-NSA. There is not really. You can run Signal and that can help and make things expensive for the authorities, but really there's no real hope. Okay, but if you are trying to secure against maybe certain other nation state actors, or if you're trying to just fend off various other malicious actors, crackers and so on, then I think the BlackBerry Key 2, including with BlackBerry's new hardware security scheme that they're running, I think it's a brilliant move, and I love a good physical keyboard. So if I were to buy a flagship, that's what I'd go with. If I wanted to go a bit more on the cheap, in fact, potentially sub $200, depending, the day and where you get it, the Nokia 6.1 2018 is just a brilliant fucking phone. 3 gig of RAM, I think it's 32 gig of onboard storage kind of sucks, but 64 would be nicer. Like the Echo Pro 3 has a 64 gig onboard storage. But the Nokia 6.1 also has dual SIM. That's really handy. The camera seems okay. It does have a fingerprint reader, but whatever. And you're going to get those operating system updates are so fucking important right now as far as security goes. It really is. BlackBerry plans on updating theirs as well. So that's a totally valid option as well. But that might be the number one. I'm at the point now with smartphones where the most important thing is it going to get not just security updates, because Google has helped make that process a little more available, where they've separated the security updates more from the operating system itself so that they can push them out to just about any phone. Not everyone, but just about, since like Android 7, okay, which I think that's great. Like my Moto E4 still gets security updates. It gets the latest ones, and that's awesome, okay? But I'm really to the point that the phone to buy is either one that you're going to put your own custom ROM on, like Lineage OS, and you're getting away from Google's Android anyway, or it's one that has some kind of guarantee that it's going to get at least a couple more operating system versions for it. And really, the Android One phones, okay, like the Nokia 6.1. And there's a couple other companies. I think like the Moto X4 might also be an Android One phone. Those are the way to go, in my opinion, if you want to do that. So that's my thoughts on it. Probably I think the best bang for your buck, and just a good phone overall, really, is in my opinion the Nokia 6.1, the 2018 edition. That is the Android One phone. There is a Nokia 6.1 Plus, which is a slightly updated version of that. I mean, even though that one's not old, it's a 2018 phone. Where it's a little bit bigger, and I think it might actually have the 64 gig of onboard storage and 4 gig of RAM and so on. This is a problem with phones overall. I hate big phones. I really do. And it's kind of why I went back to my Moto E4, because it's a phone I can actually, and look, believe me, I wear double XL size gloves. I do not have small hands. But most of these phones I cannot do one-handed. And I know they put in like custom shit into the software where it can like kind of make the screen go to 3/4 of a size and whatever, so you can handle it with one hand. I like to easily be able to handle it with one hand. And when you get above 5 inches, on screen size, like it just gets stupid and you can't do it. And it annoys the fuck out of me. So, I wish phones would get smaller, but that doesn't necessarily seem to be a thing. Even Apple's just going huge, right? They're going through 6.2 inches and whatever. And, and if you're asking me, well, what's the best iPhone to get? I still think the iPhone SE is going to be considered the last great iPhone, because everything else now that they're doing is just, I don't know. For me, it doesn't do anything for me. Like and maybe you could say, well, it's not for you, Stallion. You have a different mindset than what, Apple people want. Okay, maybe. Then if that's true, well, then there you go. But yeah. So anyway, I appreciate, that's a question that we need to update and refresh every once in a while and get into. And it's a worthwhile thing to talk about. And so, for a good long while, like there weren't, I didn't have updates to my answer to that question, because I was just like, no, buy the phone from 2 years ago. But now we're really running into the issues where a lot of updates and just app updates and so on, even if you don't install more apps, just like a lot of the updates and everything, a lot of the specs from previous years, and there's no good reason for this. I really think it's bullshit that these apps are taking up as much space as they do, and that the Android operating system, we talked about this during my review of Android Go, where wait, I don't see any difference between Android Go and stock Android. So why is there like a 2 to 4 to 5 gig difference in size between this operating system and this version of Android and this version of Android? That doesn't make any fucking sense. There's real problems here, and I think there's some funny business going on, because there's really no reason that, look, honestly, a Galaxy Nexus should be just as valid a phone today. It had NFC, you've got Bluetooth in there, right? You've got all the radios, you got 4G, you've got all the radios you could want. It's, and that even had 32 gig of onboard storage. It had everything. It's a damn fine phone. I love the Galaxy Nexus. I miss mine, frankly. In fact, Android Police, they did like a write-up. This guy was doing a series where he covers phones from the past and can you still use them now. Really, the only reason he couldn't use the Galaxy Nexus, he could say that it's slow, but he was basically saying is that, well, now, new versions of apps they don't allow you to install it from the Google Play Store onto the phone. And that's the thing, is that the obsolescence of a lot of these older phones, it's artificial. They don't need to be obsolete. It's just that they stop getting supported. And you can say, well, there's a lot of things happening under the hood with the Android and all that. There's a lot of new features and the apps have to be able to interact with that. No, the only new feature is Google Assistant. Stop. Okay. This is bullshit, and it's all just to appease investors. Talked about this many times. There's really no reason that a phone, especially like the Galaxy Nexus, still shouldn't be totally workable today. There really isn't. There it is. So for a long time, I didn't even have an update to say, because the phone from 3 years ago works just fine and dandy. But now we're to the point where very quickly apps are getting to the point that, I think there's some, you could say it has to do with security, but I think there's something a little nefarious going on. Apps are getting to the point where they won't work with older versions of Android. Even like last year's version of Android, effectively, they won't work with. And it's just getting really stupid. That whole industry is getting nuts. So there you go. I guess, out of everything that I mentioned, again, the 2018 Nokia 6.1, that's what I recommend. So, all right, let's get into another question here. So this is a question that, well, I've said that I would, readdress as time permitted, and whenever it I guess maybe even when it tickles my fancy. I'll read it again, but anyway, hey Stallion, it's not a tech question, but for a future subscriber Q&A, I'd love to hear about your favorite conspiracy theories or unsolved cold cases. Thanks for all the brilliant content and interesting ideas. So I did one 2-3 weeks ago, maybe. I talked about one of my favorite conspiracy theories, which has to do with that the Jews supposedly aren't really the Jews, they're the Edomites, and so on, blah, 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 blah. I covered all that. You can find that in the previous Wednesday Q&A. But I said then that, as I can't possibly I can't do a lot of my favorite conspiracy theories, I can't do them justice in a short period, like in one episode, so it's something that I would come back to. It's a question that I would come back to. And this week I'm going to come back to it and cover another one. Now, I want to once again make plain that the idea of conspiracy theories, I don't necessarily mean that as a pejorative. Okay. There are some conspiracy theories that end up being absolutely true, that are, long held. What is it? Room 623A, right? The AT&T room, hotel room or apartment that was being used. They had a ton of listening equipment in it, and they were spying on what was being said on cell phones. Now, that was just theory, conspiratorial theory at one time back in the 90s and early aughts. And then it ended up like in 2003 or 2004, or maybe it's a little later than that, but it ended up being absolutely true, well before the Snowden revelations, but it ended up being absolutely true. Say nothing of a lot of the theories that got proven by the Snowden revelations. Okay. So conspiracy theories can often be absolutely, I don't like this term, but for the colloquialism, can be absolutely legit. They can be very real. So I don't want to write something off just because it is a conspiracy theory. That said, most things that are considered conspiracy theories, I generally don't buy into. I don't think, or if anything, I have a little bit of a different take on it, or a significantly different take, that there might still be a conspiracy involved, but it's not what everybody thinks. For example, and this kind of relates to the one we're going to talk about. I don't believe that there is a NWO, and I don't mean like, WCW, Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall NWO. There certainly was that, and I like to consider myself a part of it. But like this Alex Jones-esque New World Order, I don't think that exists at all. However, I do think that there are multiple groups that are vying for power in this world that are not necessarily the governments of various geographic areas on this planet. So you see the difference, right? I'm not saying that some of the evidence that people have for this concept of an NWO isn't accurate and real. I am saying that there is not one group, one shadowy group trying to enslave the rest of humanity. I think there's a multitude of groups out there that are vying for some kind of control, and that maybe they've been around for a good long while. So that's where I say that, like, okay, I get some of the evidence, but I don't think that the conclusion is accurate. The conclusion is, this I'll say is a pejorative, even though I love comic books, but the conclusion is way too much something out of a comic book, way too, villainesque, that I don't even know that that's a word. Anyway, so there you have that. So this week's, the conspiracy theory I'm going to get into this week has to do with one of my favorite subjects. And just as I think that the concept that the Jews, or the theory, which again, I don't agree with, and I'm ethnically Jewish, the theory that the Jews aren't really the Jews anymore, just like I think that is a cornerstone conspiracy theory to a lot of other conspiracy theories. This is another one that is one of those cornerstones that fits in, or that plays as the core of a lot of other conspiracy theories. And this conspiracy theory is about the Annunaki. Dun, 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 dun. The Annunaki. Okay, this is an idea. So the Annunaki is what the Sumerian, again, when we're talking about the Sumerians, we're talking about what is widely considered the first civilization, real civilization on Earth, even though I would argue there are plenty more before that. Go back Tepe and so on, ones that you could point at direct evidence for, but then I think there's also a lot of indirect evidence for other civilizations that were here long before Sumer. But the Sumerian culture, their gods were called the Annunaki. Okay. Actually, more accurately, the Annunaki were, depending upon how you're translating everything, like in the name itself, you have the sky god An, which is where Anunnaki comes from, and then you have the earth goddess, which is where the rest of the term comes from. Anunnaki, meaning it's in some way it's the children of the sky goddess, or the sky god, and the earth goddess. Okay, but it's, for lack of a better phrase, they are kind of translated as being the pantheon of gods of the Sumerian civilization. Okay, which the Sumerian civilization existed, approximately 5,000 to 6,000 years ago. You could probably go a little bit further back than that, but that's our starting point here. Of course, the people that get conspiratorial about the Anunnaki would say that they came on Earth long before that. And we're talking on the order of 500,000 years ago that the Anunnaki started any of their business on the planet Earth. Now, a person that popularized the concept of the Anunnaki, and we'll get into the conspiracy theory around them, but the person that popularized the conversation about the Anunnaki being part of how humanity's here, being this grand conspiracy of history, is a guy named Zecharia Sitchin, who I had the pleasure of, I would go so far as to say that he and I were friends. I was invited to his funeral in, actually, it'll be almost to the day, I guess it'll be 8 years since he died. He died in October of 2010. Like I said, I was invited to the funeral. I wasn't able to make it. But anyway, Zecharia Sitchin wrote a book, I want to say in around like 64, called The 12th Planet. And this is a book I totally recommend anybody read. It is really, this is really, really interesting stuff. Far superior to Eric von Daniken's Chariot of the Gods, which would come out around the same time. Interestingly, Zecharia Sitchin's work and his explanation of what the Anunnaki are, which he would pretty much say are aliens, and that gets into our conspiracy theory. Like all of his work, because the mainstream press, the mainstream media, and so on, were going so hardcore against Chariot of the Gods, against Eric von Daniken, the 12th Planet kind of snuck underneath all that pretty stealthily, and since it was never properly debunked, really until, again, it's an argument if it was really debunked. I think there's some things. This is the hard part of talking about these conspiracy theories, is that, every conspiracy theory is effectively like a mind map. And where do you start? Where do you go? What do you decide to talk about? What don't you decide to talk about? Anytime that I would talk about these kinds of theories, say with Stephanie or whoever else, it'd be an all night long situation. We'd be talking for 6-7 hours, before we'd know it. Holy shit, it's 5 a.m., because that's how long it takes to really discuss all of this and to answer questions and so on. So it's tough to even in an hour to really describe very well some of these, conspiracy theories. And believe me, there's no YouTube video that's going to do a good job of it either. So I'm trying to be somewhat brief. But Zecharia Sitchin's work, again, he would popularize this conspiracy theory around the Anunnaki. He has a series of books called the Earth Chronicles. I think there's a total of 7 of them. It starts with the 12th Planet, ends with a book called, fittingly, The End of Days. And in this book, in this book series, he would amend a lot of what he says, say in the 12th Planet or in a previous entry in the Earth Chronicles series. So even Sitchin would know that at points he was wrong. So that's kind of, one could say, well, that's like a bit of he's engaging in moving the goalpost, or he's doing all this other stuff to, defeat people who are genuinely debunking his work and so on. I think there's plenty of what Sitchin put out there that is ripe for debunking and has been debunked, but it wouldn't get any serious treatment really until the late 90s and maybe even the early aughts, when someone would finally pay attention to it. And that was probably because of its getting popularized because of the internet, not even so much because of the books, even though the Earth Chronicles were, especially the 12th Planet, were wild bestsellers. Just wild. Really. So keep that in mind with all of this. But anyway, the 12th Planet, a lot of Sitchin's work, again, kind of fell under the radar, even though it was very popular amongst people that knew about it, or, that were in that kind of field. And this would be kind of your Ancient Aliens crowd, even though fuck all that. But regardless, I think Sitchin has some really great points to bring up, and he has some very interesting things to say. A lot of people would argue what he says is things taken out of context, or that he's translating it wrong, and so on. In fact, I would even argue that he translated some things wrong, but not the things that people want to claim. Like, I wouldn't claim, like when he's talking about the Anunnaki. So here's the conspiracy theory, okay? 500,000 years ago, you have this planet, all right? And of course that had been going on for more than 500,000 years. But you effectively have this planet called Nibiru that every 3,600 years sweeps into our solar system and passes by Earth very close. So close that you could, very easily in a very basic rocket go from Nibiru to Earth and land on Earth. There's a bunch more about, like what created the prime asteroid field in our solar system, and about Nibiru actually crashing into what was originally a larger planet called Tiamat, which would become Mars and the asteroid field and so on. But that's kind of inconsequential to this. Bottom line being is that there is an alien race that lives on this planet called Nibiru that sweeps in every 3,600 years or so, and it's due to come back soon. Like, this falls in line with some of Isaac Newton's theories about the end of the world, right? Like, he would say 2064 or something, or 2061, not before, but maybe sometime later. So, if Nibiru is a thing, we should be seeing it here pretty soon. But anyway, regardless of that, that this would swoop in, and that because of what happened, like previous collisions and problems with the planet Nibiru, they have an environmental problem, and they need gold. Okay, and this is where this raises a potential answer for why is gold such a big deal on Earth. And it's because it's something that we had been taught was important by our alien overlords from the planet Nibiru. Okay, that's kind of the idea here. And Nibiru swoops in. They need gold to launch gold flecks, or flecks of gold into their atmosphere to keep their planet heated and so on, blah blah blah. And that's the whole purpose of what they're doing. Now, originally, every time that Nibiru would swoop in, the Anunnaki themselves, before there were Homo sapiens sapiens, the Anunnaki themselves would end up doing all of the physical labor to mine the gold. But then one day, one of the Anunnaki, particularly you have two brothers, Enlil and Enki, sons of Anu, who is the king of the Anunnaki. It's kind of in the name. They come up with this idea that, we'll genetically modify this species Homo on Earth, and we'll make them, and even while Nibiru's away, we'll make them do all of the mining for gold and so on. Now, a couple interesting tidbits to bring up about this, to where it lends some legitimacy. Again, you want to be careful with the term legitimacy or legit, but that lends some legitimacy to this, is that there are, in various parts of the world, oddly, what appear to be mines for gold that date to 150,000 years ago. Those are out there. Okay, now you could say that, well, I would interpret whatever this is differently. It's not a mine or something. Okay, you can do that. But it can be interpreted, and interesting interpretations can be made, that there are 150,000-year-old gold mines on planet Earth. Now, there shouldn't be any humans that would know a goddamn thing about how to go about that, how to do mining and so on. I mean, we're talking even before maybe the times of stone knives and bear skins. Okay, so why the hell are there gold mines out there? So, I mean, that's an interesting thing to bring up. The other interesting thing is that, and look, if you don't buy into climate change and blah, 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 okay, then that's you, and you don't buy into it. But you have, scientific advisors, say to the president, like to President Obama, Cass Sunstein in particular, who had a theory that, to help alleviate global warming and so on, that we should launch gold flecks into the atmosphere, which is exactly what Sitchin was writing about in the Earth Chronicles decades previous as far as what the Annunaki were trying to do. So you have a couple things there that go, well, okay, we might have some gold mines, and our present science today says to rescue our atmosphere, and that was the problem on Nibiru. Our present theories are based upon shit that Sitchin claims to have come up with, based upon translations from Sumerian texts. So, I mean, that's just a couple things. It's not enough to base an entire theory or, frankly, an entire book series off of, but there's something there. Okay. And so the idea is that the Anunnaki do genetically modify ancient humans and, our ancestors into Homo sapiens sapiens. And in so doing, this is how one way that people can, and Sitchin would explain that, okay, yeah, we evolved in Africa, but the space or the spaceports and bases, the Anunnaki bases on Earth, were in the Levant. We're in the Fertile Crescent and so on. And so this is why, he would say that the Garden of Eden was, when Adam gets made, which there's some interesting points to be made within this, in that in the Sumerian language, the word kind of for man and the first man is like Adamu. Okay. It's very much smacks of Adam. And there's even terms like Eden, except it's Edin instead of how we spell it in English, Eden, and so on. But I mean, the phonetic is almost exactly the same. And, there's a lot of these references within, this Sumerian culture and so on, with what a lot of people consider to be, the actual history or creation stories of humanity based upon the Bible, based upon Torah or, whatever you're running with there. So, a lot of that makes things very interesting. Of course, it's easily explainable through a concept called pan-Babylonialism, which means that really the Hebrews just during the Babylonian captivity just took a lot of Babylonian stories and turned it into their Bible. And Torah itself basically says that the Pentateuch was lost anyway. So sure, they filled in the gaps, right? They claim to have found it, but that's awfully fortunate. But that's a whole other can of worms. So the Anunnaki end up genetically modifying, our ancestors to where they become Homo sapiens sapiens. They then use the Homo sapiens sapiens to mine for gold and so on. And somewhere along the line, the Great Flood, Noah's Flood, right, which is also in the Epic of Gilgamesh and so on, that happens. And pretty much, there's debate as to what Sitchin was saying. Was he saying that, well, the ice caps melted and so it destroyed everything that the Anunnaki made? Or was he saying that Enlil got pissed off and there was a rebellion by, kind of like the beginning of the movie Stargate or something, or, like what Ra had to deal with in Egypt, in the movie Stargate, but that there was a rebellion and Enlil wanted to destroy humanity, because it had become, the species had become a problem and it had become rebellious. And there's so much to talk about where there are some interesting hints of evidence as far as that goes, or evidence in that, not that there were aliens or anything, but that, humans, the human race has had to deal with various cataclysmic events and so on. And what brought all that on, who knows? And that there were these long-lived kings and demigods and so on, like in the Turin Kings list. There's some interesting things outside that exist outside of, and supposedly this is what Sitchin's reading from, that point at, well, there's some oddities in our history that, and some seemingly incomplete, incomplete texts or incomplete parts of the story that were given as far as how history actually worked. One of my favorite ones to bring up is, a more recent example. The Turin Kings list is, that's an Egyptian, creation. But if you even want to go to the Greeks, if you want to go significantly later, like 3,000 years later and so on, you could point at the works of Berosus, right? Which we only have fragments of them, but we do know that there was a 3-volume history of Earth, effectively, that Berosus wrote that went back 100,000 years. But look, it's not like just the history of the Earth and its creation. It's the history of humanity, but the history of humanity going back 100,000 years, not just 6 or 7 or 8 or 10, that like most archaeologists want to point at today for us, that there was nothing before then. The Egyptians and the Greeks would seem to completely disagree with you, and disagree with you to the point of writing entire books about it. Not just like simple little, mentions, like Herodotus would mention that, there's 5 ages of man and so on, and it's all like in a couple sentences. No, these are entire books, histories that go back 100,000 years at least. So the idea that humanity had something, before what your run-of-the-mill archaeologist is going to tell you when humanity started, which is pretty much with Sumer, has some intriguing evidence going for it. Okay, like there is something to that idea, and it's not just like fanciful speculation. I mean, and archaeologists have problems too, in that you effectively have, with both Sumer and ancient Egypt, you have what are pretty much pop-up civilizations with no proto versions of whatever was within their culture. Like, Egypt just seems to be, it's a shake and bake society. It's like, okay, yeah, put it in the oven and it's done. And like, wait a minute, but what were the ingredients? Because we can't find any of the ingredients. Just suddenly out of nowhere, they have this wildly complex writing system, and so on. And it's systematized. It's not like it's just, like there's a bunch of different versions of it. It's very much systematized. And yeah, I mean, you got to answer that question. Like, wait, how did that just like suddenly get agreed upon by, thousands or hundreds of thousands or however many people, to be the way that things get written, or that this is how we interact with each other and so on. I mean, this stuff just like pretty much appears out of nowhere. But then that would be kind of Sitchin's argument, or a lot of other people's arguments, is that the Anunnaki are the ones that gave all of this culture and, or allowed for the quantum leap in thinking to where there could be these systematized forms of writing and language and so on that humanity just didn't have before. Like, they weren't even really capable of it. Now, you could get guys like David Icke and some others who would come down, or who would expand upon what Sitchin was saying and say that the Anunnaki were actually lizards, that they're kind of the original lizard people. And then that would, at some point turn into the Jews and so on. And they have like their puppet organizations like the Illuminati and whatever else. But I don't necessarily want to get into like that, because again, going down that train of thought would take more than hours, to really describe and look at all of the evidence as far as that goes. But, as far as a favorite conspiracy theory of mine, sure, this is one of mine, is that I don't believe it, and I really don't believe it. Like, I don't believe that the Anunnaki came from the planet Nibiru and came down to Earth and, genetically modified the humans and so on to do this. Like, I actually don't accept any of that. But I am inclined to believe that there were civilizations, one could call a civilization X, that existed at one point on this planet, that may have been like, their representatives may have been what the Sumerians called the Anunnaki. Because again, all Anunnaki is saying is that they came from the sky. So what if they're in an airplane of a type, and they landed? It doesn't have to be some spacefaring UFO. It could be just an airplane that landed, or they had jetpacks, because they're constantly shown, the Anunnaki are constantly shown with wings, in Sumerian hieroglyphs and so on. So, yeah, I mean, like, there's no reason to jump to, holy shit, there's this whole other planet that swoops into the solar system, and yeah, there's a whole race there that lives forever, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's something to be said for, like, people living longer, because, again, there's the Turin King's List, and there's some other interesting aspects to that. But regardless of that, like, there's no need for it to actually be aliens, that the Anunnaki were lizard people, or that they were just some kind of, humanoid alien or whatever. I mean, and Sitchin gets into where his claim is that what really started him down researching this path was the verse in Torah, or in the book of Genesis, which is a very odd verse, which is Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, which talks about the Nephilim, okay, or Nephilim, depending upon how, who's saying it, how they pronounce it. So these, Nephilim, they are supposedly the mixture of the daughters of men and the sons of God, which he would argue is that, like, literally the Anunnaki start stooping humans, right? Like, I mean, that's the idea here, and that these Nephilim are like these giants and really powerful and so on, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to go much longer on this because we got to wrap up the episode, okay? But bottom line being, there is, in a lot of these theories, okay, so quickly people want to run to aliens. I mean, and they're interesting. Like, a lot of what Sitchin has to say, I think he has a lot of wonderful things to say. I think he has a lot of great points to bring up. I think the idea that there is this connective tissue between so many different ancient cultures on Earth is a very interesting thing to bring up. But just like I think going to simulation theory and that we exist in one giant computer simulation and so on, like, that's not the easiest answer to explain things when we have the laws of physics that work so goddamn well. And yes, they do. I mean, they'll get you to land somebody on the moon, which, wow, that's a theory we're going to have to talk about at some point in the future, I suppose. Again, even though I've already brought it up on Sovereign Tech Prime recently, but I mean, we have been on the moon. Hate to break it to you. But, I mean, like, the thing that allows somebody to do that are these very real laws that it makes sense to, like, the simplest answer is that this is how the universe works. Not that it's a giant simulation, because then you have to come up with a whole bunch of other crap. Like, wait a minute. So why is this person building the computer? Why is the person doing this? Why is this? Wait, how did this work? What do we, is it a quantum computer? Is it blah? I mean, like, it goes nuts. And just like I think that when you try to explain these oddities within history, or when you try to explain the Anunnaki, and so on, when you try to say, well, they're actually aliens and they're coming from this planet that's swooping in and all, I mean, like, it's so much simpler and probably true that it was just some other human civilization that came down. And I don't think that it's outlandish at all to think that there were humans that invented the airplane. Why? Because we have airplanes. There's no, it's not like a huge logical leap to go through. Okay. As to where, this idea of trying to, figure out that, like, that this planet Nibiru comes through and all this stuff. I mean, something to get into, like, Velikovsky's work, talking about the galactic game of billiards and so on that's happened within the solar system, throughout thousands upon thousands upon thousands, if not millions of years. But there's no need, there's really no need to go that far. You can Occam's razor this shit and you can get right to the simple answer. And I think the simple answer is that there might have just been an advanced civilization. I mean, we have evidence of that, like, we know that there are whole civilizations we know jack shit about that are underneath the Mediterranean, right? There's hundreds of cities in the Mediterranean Sea and we don't know anything about the people that live there or what those cultures were and so on before the Mediterranean decided to fill it in. Talk about a flood myth. So, I mean, the Anunnaki, it's interesting. There are interesting things to glean from that and to wonder about, okay? But I think that there are much simpler answers. Not to say that they're any less boring or interesting, but there are much simpler answers than saying that it's aliens that came down. And really, like, Ike and these other people to somehow say, well, they're reptilian. I mean, now you're just... like, now you're just adding layer on top of layer that you have no evidence for. Like, none. You have, I mean, there's some interesting evidence about, like, the worship of serpents and the role that certain reptilian creatures and symbols play within history. Okay, like there's something to explore there, but that sure as fuck doesn't mean that there's an entire reptilian species. Okay, and I know people want to say, well, what about the Troodon, right? The Troodon could have been like this 3 meter, or not 3 meter, like this 3 foot tall, little bipedal dinosaur walking around that actually lost its tail and was a little humanoid dinosaur going all over the place. I mean, woo. I suppose that's possible. I mean, because I firmly believe that dinosaurs evolved into chickens, and evolved into birds. But yeah, I mean, like even those theories run into problems, right? Because now we know that dinosaurs themselves probably had feathers. Not that they evolved feathers as they became birds, but from the get-go, they, like T-Rex, had feathers, and so on. Right. So where are the feathered people? If there's these reptilians that supposedly, evolved originally from the dinosaurs and maybe from the Troodon. I mean, you don't have to go that far. I think that there are genuine questions to ask. There are genuine historical mysteries to look into, and they are fascinating. But we don't have to run to aliens for this, and we don't have to run to, the Anunnaki, they're still running the show here. There's still Anunnaki around, and they're in charge, and blah blah. I mean, you're running away without exploring. I don't want to say more reasonable, but you're running away without bothering to exploring like far simpler answers, and that's good science. Of course, then there's people who think science is one grand conspiracy, right? What do you do with them? Well, you don't talk to them because I don't know how the fuck do you convince those people, of anything. So I do think this idea of the Anunnaki coming down from the planet Nibiru, modifying humans all to get gold and blah, blah, blah. I love gold, right? All that kind of crap. It's a fun theory. Sitchin's work is very interesting, and I think there's actually a lot of great things to take away from it. But me personally, no. I'm far more inclined to think that while there is something to the concept of the Anunnaki, just like there's something to, the Greek gods on Mount Olympus. Like, boy, there's so many stories about them, and they all act so human. Well, I say this all the time. That's probably because they were human. They might have had some advanced technologies here and there, but we talked about this recently on Sovereign Tech, where the idea of everybody having a smartphone or everybody having a computer or everybody having a car is a modern byproduct, of the assembly line of the industrial age. Technology could have existed before. We just don't really know it because it wasn't as democratized as we expect it now. But most people expect that, well, if the Greeks, had lightning guns or I don't know, whatever the fuck they had, if the Greeks had some kind of communicator, well, if they're writing about some kind of communication technology that the gods would use, well, then everybody should have it. No, that's not how it worked historically. Historically, there were, maybe not to our standards, but maybe there were. There were advanced technologies, but they weren't democratized. Not everybody had access to it. Only very few people would have access to this sort of thing. And people forget that's how humanity worked culturally. The idea of everybody having access to the latest technologies, that is wildly new, only in the past 100 years at best. How many people were toying with electricity for decades, if not sooner, before it became something popular that everybody had access to? It took a long time. Now we're just used to, this new technology gets out, everybody gets it. That's not how it worked historically. So there could have been advanced technologies that just weren't democratized, that not everybody had fucking access to. So anyway, there we go. I don't buy into it, but I think that the concept of the Anunnaki and their mining for gold and advancing humans to do so, and them eventually leaving, and I didn't even get into that. Supposedly there was a civil war and so on, but they'll be back. The Anunnaki, Nibiru is going to swoop back in the next few decades, I think, or 100 years maybe. That's how the theory goes for Sitchin, and based upon some other interesting calculations on the end of the world. Maybe they'll be back, but I don't think so. I don't think that's happening, baby. But anyway, all right, so we'll wrap that up. That's an interesting one. That's kind of the cornerstone. The idea, I mean, really like this whole concept that aliens came to Earth and gave us technology and helped us advance and so on. A lot of that really starts with the likes of Zecharia Sitchin and his interpretation of the Annunaki, or of course like Eric von Daniken with Chariot of the Gods and so on. So, but I don't buy any of it, or I don't buy that interpretation that it's aliens. So, all right, we're running a little bit long on this one. Let's get into our album of the week, and then we'll wrap this baby up. Our album of the week, I don't think I've covered this before, and I feel bad that I didn't, and I'm pretty sure that I didn't, because I think that somehow it got past my radar, and I'm not sure how that happened. So there's a band I am a big fan of. And unfortunately, they had one really huge, they had a few hits, but they had one really big song that has turned into a running joke, which is a shame because I think it's a genuinely cool and epic song. And you could say it's cheesy, sure, but I think it's serious. I don't think it's meant to be comedy. I think it's great. I remember as a teenager, and this is 15 years after it was originally a hit, in the late 90s here, where I would listen to it, and I thought it was the greatest goddamn song on earth. And I remember actually at the time, I would say, yeah, that's my favorite song ever. And I thought it was so cool because of what it was dealing with, about going to outer space and so on. Kind of fitting. We're just talking about the Anunnaki, or theories around the Anunnaki. The band I'm talking about is Europe. Now, there's an irony to be said for the band being called Europe. Of course, their lead singer, Joey Tempest, and main songwriter, tremendous fucking singer. What a voice. Boy, check out his solo work sometime. Damn. But Joey Tempest was, out of Sweden. So, it makes sense. But it's just funny, you have the band America, right? Which America's great. The band, not the country. And then you have Europe. And I love the band Europe. And understand, Europe's been active for a good long while. They started, in like 82, 84, somewhere around there, rocked it until 92, took a break, came back in 99, then came back in 2002, and they've been going ever since. Ironically, and people don't know this, everybody knows them. The song I was referencing earlier, of course, is The Final Countdown, which now everybody thinks is a joke, and, fuck you. It's a great song, okay? And I know it got used in a bunch of different, movies and comedies in the aughts to do something funny, or it gets used in commercials. I think it's a kick-ass song, so deal with it. And anyway, a lot of people don't realize, that they even had other hits back then, Carrie, so on. But also that in the past 10 years, literal past decade, they've been doing their best work, their best work ever. These are tremendous fucking albums they've been coming out with. Now, their 2015 album, I know I covered, I think actually as an album of the week on Sovereign Tech Prime, when album of the week became a part of that, or at least I mentioned it. And that album was War of Kings. Tremendous, heavy hitting album. Just great, solid rock. That is such a great album. It might be their best album. I do like, there are other albums by them that maybe I could think of that I liked better. What was the one that came out in 09? Not Secret Society or Bag of Bones. It was before that. Star from the Dark, I think. That came out 05. I think Star from the Dark is a badass album. But War of Kings might be their best album. Certainly their best. Aside from Star from the Dark, certainly their best since The Final Countdown itself, that actual album, from the 80s. They came out with an album in 2017, and I'm pretty sure that I missed this, and I didn't realize that it was out until much later. We're well into 2018, and I think I only discovered it a few months ago, not even. And it's called Walk the Earth. And it came out in 2017. I think it's another, just like War of Kings, I think it's another track for track album. There is so much to enjoy here, so much to take in with the album. And it opens right up with the title track, Walk the Earth, which I think is fantastic. The Siege, Kingdom United, Election Day, Turn to Dust. There's just solid songs on this. It's a fine sequel to War of Kings. Again, War of Kings, I think, is still the stronger album, and just what a heavy hitter that is. But I really thought Walk the Earth was a great sequel to that. So, I mean, you got to like Joey Tempest's voice, and why wouldn't you? I think he has one of the best voices in rock. These are guys that are, I mean, the nice thing about Europe is that they're not really, they started so young, they're not really as old as a lot of the other acts out there. Like, it's hard to believe, that Kiss is going to be pushing 70 here, or that Motley Crue is about to push 60 and so on. I mean, these are guys in their 50s in general, which is kind of young for a lot of people in that 80s scene, metal scene. But yeah, I mean, Europe, boy, in fact, as soon as I wanted to talk about it today, I wanted to see if they were on tour somewhere, and I sadly couldn't find if they were on tour. But yeah, I mean, such a solid band. If you've never watched any of their live DVDs, you got to check that out. I mean, these guys rock so hard. And I know you're thinking, wait, yeah, all they did is the Final Countdown. No, they've been doing albums like nonstop for the past decade, even before then. I mean, really, ever since they came back in like 2002, they've been doing albums ever since, and I think they're all solid. But certainly Start from the Dark, War of Kings, and now the latest, which is our album of the week, which is Walk the Earth. I think it all been fine outings, perfect outings. War of Kings especially was awesome. But Walk the Earth, give it a listen, especially that first track, that opening track. The opening two tracks are probably the most solid on there that I really like. But there's a lot to like within that. I mean, there's other songs, GTO, Wolves. I mean, they're just great songs. That have a lot of feeling and some very, very, honestly, some unique bass lines, I think, within them. So check it out. And if you never did, boy, like I said, their lead singer, Joey Tempest, I'm a big fan. He had 2 or 3, maybe even 4 solo albums, and they're all enjoyable. I mean, they're all like, they're different. They're not just like, he just like did Europe, but on his own. But like during his break, because like I said, they broke up pretty much in 92 and would come back in 99. Then they'd break up sort of again, and then come back. But in that time frame, Joey Tempest kept on going, and I thought he did some of his best work, in the solo realm. So yeah, Europe, Walk the Earth, tremendous album. Again, maybe not as solid as 2015's War of Kings, but it's there. I wouldn't say it's bad at all. I wouldn't call it substandard either. Where I could kind of call a couple of Europe albums, maybe I could say that they're a little more subpar to what they normally do, but it's very few. The bulk of Europe's career has been badass music. I mean, really, and you could say it's cheesy, and again, okay, fine. But then what? There, it's cheesy. Okay. So what? But a lot of this stuff is not cheesy. Like War of Kings is not cheesy. Even the album before that, Bag of Bones, that wasn't cheesy at all. And Walk the Earth I don't think is cheesy. I think it's got, again, there's solid rockers on this. So check it out, Walk the Earth from Europe, and check out the rest of their shit if you never did. So, all right, that's it for our Wednesday Q&A, our very first one for October. Well, anyway, we had some stuff to redress, I think, for the year, and it was good to talk about the Annunaki a bit, because I bring up Sitchin here and there whenever I think that science, modern science, or present science proves something that Sitchin was talking about back in the day, even just a few decades ago. So it was good to kind of like go over that again and just where I stand on it. That way you have that for reference. Even though I think at some point we're going to talk about the Annunaki in the User podcast, or we will talk about like the whole idea of aliens and them coming to Earth, because that concept needs a good solid debunking, and the Golden Stallion is ready to do it, and I'll do it on User podcast. So all right, I will see all of you on the other side.